Hello and welcome to another edition of Pricing College with your hosts Aidan Campbell
and Joanna Wells.
In today's episode we want to talk about brands. Are brands still as important in 2022 as they were maybe back in the mid-20th century? Or is the day of brands, is it reaching its sell-by date?
I think, it's not a clear-cut answer to this. And I was thinking about it the other day when I was looking at the supermarket brands, and I was thinking, gosh, a lot of these brands used to have a lot of loyalty. A lot of people just bought brands. I'm thinking in the biscuit, snacks and beverages industries, those big top sellers, like that was what people automatically would buy without question. But over the years, now could be due to changing, consumer preferences, people buying from off different channels, going to the store versus online, that these brands are less powerful in a way. But then I was thinking, okay, so that's happening sort of in the supermarket. But what's happening in retail, you're sort of seeing the reverse, like big sports brands moving away from sort of those distributor type stores and just really expanding their brand and range and just really focusing on themselves rather than putting themselves in context with other brands, fighting for that. They're going, okay, we're strong enough on our own to have a whole shop and store and confident enough that people will come and are attracted to that brand just because of what we've done. And maybe that's due to provenance, heritage. They've got a reputation in being the best, which maybe the food retailers don't.
I think a brand really is, it is your value management. It takes a lifetime to build a brand, they say. Is there a saying that it takes a lifetime to build a brand and you can destroy it in an afternoon? If there's not a saying, there should be. I think really you're building your value management system where you're really, what is the company that you're doing? What do you sell? What do you sell to customers? And as we've said on this podcast many times, that's always a work in progress. It's never a set and forget. You never reach value-based pricing and sunbathe in the beautiful sunshine there in the uplands. It's always a constant journey. And I think with a brand, it's the same thing. Clearly you build a brand this year, 10 years later, the wind may be changing. You look at industries that were seen as great, maybe aren't seen as great now. You look at like maybe oil or whatever, whereas it was seen as leading to automation and stuff back in the mid-20th century, and now it could be seen as a bit more fossil fuels and dirty, and you need to reinvest and push into electric cars and all that sort of stuff. So I think it's a constant evolution, it's a constant journey, and the minute that you feel, and tastes change and customer values change. When you do your value exploration and you find out what your customers value this year, let's be honest, next year, the world has changed. What's happened even in the last 6 months? We've now got inflation's back. We've got, there's a war on again. We've got COVID's receding. We've got many things happening that people wouldn't have forecast, and things change, things move, and what people want, what people desire, what they compare versus other things. And you'll see, even in short periods of time, new entrants become old hat. What seemed fresh and new, maybe it isn't going to last the test of time. You look at Netflix, which seems to be going backwards. I even saw in the paper this week, Under Armour, which was a new cool, clothing brand, which was usurping, Reeboks and Nikes and all that stuff. Now apparently they're getting profit downgrades this year when they're losing popularity. So it's a constant evolution, and will you be able to, will brands last forever? I think it's always, the answer there is, in nearly all cases, no.
I think it's an interesting point of, saying you've got a brand. What is a brand? It's your value management system. But what is a value management system if it's not attached to customers, consumers, and an understanding of the value chain? I don't think you can think of a value management system in any other regard, because that will become as abstract as a brand if not associated with the person that's buying the brand. And I think this is where a lot of companies have gone astray with branding and branding's association to pricing and pricing power through branding. They've forgotten the source, the reference point, which is the customer. Often what the customer values is very different from what the company values or thinks is the most valuable thing about the business. I mean, Aidan, you mentioned oil there. For many years, the value management system in oils and fuels was based on their supply chain, how smart the engineering and supply chain and procurement was, not necessarily anything to do with why people bought the fuel in the first place. Even from a B2B, this goes right from the B2B to the B2C perspective. It was always based on the fuel company's perspective of value and how really clever they were in engineering that oil. But over the years, you see, there's massive changes in how people buy and what they value. Fossil fuels, they don't want that anymore. It's considered, unsustainable for humanity, for the earth. And now they're moving to electric cars, and we see Ampol now trying to associate its brand with more of the electric cars, cleaner energy over time. Recently, I read that they're putting, battery recharging in every petrol station. So that has some connotation with brand. They're trying to make their brand more sustainable. But I think that's my point on value management system. It's very important to connect your value management system and the brand to your customer, and the customer changes. The customer changes how they buy. And as we can see from the new generation that are very addicted to TikTok, they go through brands by the day, depending on what the social influencer says is a powerful brand. Then what a brand emerges, becomes very successful, and is gone overnight. So maybe there's different, you have to think about brand in terms of different age groups, as well as value drivers and behaviours. So segmentation, I think my point here, is very key with brand.
I think a brand, what people associate it with, and again, this comes down to the values and what customers value. Oftentimes, the people who run the company might want it to be something different than what their customers see and what they do value. You look at, let's take a McDonald's, probably the most famous brand in the world, debatable, but up there in the top 5, we'll say, the Golden Arches. What does that brand really mean? It really means what you're going to get, it's going to be fast, they'll have a reasonably clean toilet, and literally that's about it, isn't it? Is that though what the company wants to promote? And oftentimes you'll see, I think we're all aware now, they're saying, go woke, or get woke, go broke, where these corporations with major brands, Gillette's an example, and many different ones, have gone for almost chasing the new, wanting to be the hot young thing, wanting to be the new, even though they've been around for, I don't know, in Gillette's case, maybe 100 years or more, and they're known globally, and they produce a very similar product that they produced last year with minor technological improvements, but they go chasing this new, being seen to being hip and fresh and, the zeitgeist, and some people rebel against that and push back. And, there is the old concept of, when you've built this brand that caters to a certain audience, that audience may not be seen as the vanguard, but to be the vanguard, often you have to be, smaller and nicher. And when you're smaller and nicher, maybe you're going to burn your existing customer base. That old, what's that thing where you've got your cash cows and that sort of stuff. And if you've got something in a life cycle, it is pretty tricky, but people try to be something to everyone, and I don't know if that's always possible without sub-brands and different stuff. So you're getting into very, very complex areas. Just the other point I'll make is, trends change. You could build the best business in the world, and without you knowing it or whatever, just overnight or over the period of a couple of years, the market could change. And the example I'll give says, cosmetics and those sort of aspects like deodorants and those sort of personal products. I would argue back 50, 60 years ago, most people used soap and water, and maybe perfume if you had more wealth. And then it moved into post-war era, the wonders of chemistry, the better life through chemistry, better life through science. People started using mass-produced products deodorants, moisturising creams, all this sort of stuff. And that was seen as the best thing in the world. Now from what I can see, the whole trends are moving in the opposite direction. Back to freshness, cleanness, simplicity, lack of chemical compounds. You're almost back at soap and water. And that's now seen as the most progressive and advanced thing. So, you've built that brand, and you can think of all these, Palmolives and Reckitt Benckiser and these sort of companies who have brands and portfolios worth billions. But now, are they worth billions? And will they be worth billions 10 years down the line? It's debatable.
I've seen some big companies who they almost create more brands because they know that the younger generation love brands. So even in B2B, they think, okay, my answer to decreasing sales is to create more brands because we will attract more people through brands. But having brands and them being good brands are very, very different. People aren't just attracted to products with fancy names. They want the product to perform. And as we said before, that's based on the value management system, which has to be in itself in some way associated to performance history, reliability, all that sort of risk. It's in a way proven to the product can actually solve customers' problems, and it can do it well. That is the heritage, the provenance behind the brand. I've also seen the opposite happen, where you have companies that don't want to create any brands, new brands that could be really drive the market and appeal to changing consumer tastes, and stay with the traditional brand because simply that was a cash cow. And they thought, oh, you know what, this drink, this sugary drink, it's the best thing since sliced bread, and we really don't have to move quickly with the market. And as a consequence, lost huge amounts of market share to, up-and-coming entrants that are into more healthy beverages, the kombuchas, the sparkling waters, all various types, simply because of, they just didn't want, they thought their brand was strong enough on its own and they didn't need to move. But, those powerhouse brands are also suffering at the moment. So either end of that spectrum, you really can't. I think the point here is that you really can't just rest or take an easy option here. You can't just create brands because you think, we're in a brand-driven world now. The brands have to be based on something real, based on values, and based on service history, and you can't have an internal sort of arrogant opinion about who you are. And it can't be set and forget. You can't just leave. You can't just leave brands. You've got to actually know when to kill them off quickly and when to change. Sometimes just because you want to lead the market with either a traditional brand or a new brand doesn't mean it's going to happen. So you've got to almost take the feedback response very do something with it. You can't just set and forget. If the market doesn't respond how you wanted them to respond to a brand, what do you do with it? You don't always necessarily kill it off, but you've got to make a decision, and you've got to start tracking and monitoring your brands just as closely as you would do with your sales or your prices.
Joanna mentioned soft drinks there. One thing I think is interesting is Coca-Cola and also Pepsi. They've invented new products, Coke Zero, which I think was rebranded Coke No Sugar, slightly different colouring, but it's still called Coke. It's still got the local, the Coca-Cola branding and, that aspect, as does that Coke. And I think to some extent that's smart because it's transitioning it into a new sector. Just one thing I'd also add that I found interesting when I saw it recently. I was in a shop, sort of a fancy sports shoe shop, and they were selling Doc Marten boots. And Doc Marten boots have been basically the exact same product, I don't know how long, but it seems to be 50, 60 years. Those black normal boots with a yellow sort of trim, prominent yellowy orange trim around the edge. But they're permanently seen to be sold as edgy, counterculture, up and coming, youthful, that aspect. They seem to have that aspect permanently, as if they're always permanently growing, permanently out on the outside, which is literally unbelievable for a company to be doing that when you consider that our parents wore them and probably their grandparents wore them also. But I think when the kids are wearing them, they're probably feeling the same way that people did 30 years ago, which is very impressive branding, never going fully mainstream, but always being slightly on the way out, on the outside looking in, being cool, which I suppose is what a lot of brands want to accomplish while still being profitable. I don't know if that had much to do with what we're discussing, but I find it interesting.
Yeah, I think it does. It does. It's like you have to. It's brand alignment to your customers, being on the ball, knowing the context, not just putting a brand out there and just either innocently or maybe arrogantly assuming it's going to be a winner. Sometimes it's not always a winner, and sometimes you've got to objectively observe your brands and the market, just to see if you've got that match, that alignment, to see if it works. And those that do that and do it authentically are not afraid to take the negative feedback from the market are going to be the winners. You just have to adapt quickly, and then over time you'll get there. But you've also have to have a history, but performance history. Doc Martens, they haven't let generations down. People have felt cool, and they probably parents have handed on the Doc Martens. They seem to last forever. They've got that reliability there as well. But I think beyond the actual product itself, it's got that counterculture feel, and it does it very well. But anyway, look, thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed that podcast. Feel free to get in touch with us with any questions if you have any. Thank you.
Thanks. Have a great weekend. Bye.